In these moments before we offer up Yizkor, I want to talk about a painful dilemma that is very, very common. I want to talk about a certain genre of pain that many of our families have experienced over the years, and some of you may be experiencing now. What happens when we lose our loved ones before we lose them? What happens when we lose our loved ones before we lose them? Because while they are still alive, they are beset with cognitive challenges or with physical challenges, and they look like who they are, kind of, sort of, but they're not who they are. And there's just a gradual, long, ineluctable period of decline, a long twilight that feels like forever. And one of the things that happens as months turn into many months, and as years turn into many years, and the person that we love so much is not who they were, cognitively, physically, their world shrinks, they don't get out of the house, they don't get out of their bed, and it's forever. One of the things that happens is it sometimes gets hard to remember who they were before their debility and their illness set in. And you hear it in different forms. It's been so long that my mother was struggling with Alzheimer's. It's been so long that my father lost his mobility. I kind of can't even remember what they were like before they were sick. It's the problem of the primacy of recency bias. And then there's another problem. We kind of can't remember who they were. It's been so long. The present moment crowds out the past. We can't recover it. And then, when we lose them the second time, when we lose them for real, it's very bewildering. Here's what I hear. How am I supposed to grieve my mother when I've been grieving her for years? How am I supposed to grieve my father when it's been years since I've had my father? And then what people feel is this bewildering mix. Often people feel relief, and then guilt that they feel relief, and then just sadness for the whole thing, for all these accumulated losses. What do we do about it? What's an answer to it? Yesterday, I shared the column of Roger Rosenblatt in the Times about how to be a happy 85-year-old. And one of the things he says in this column is just so short, and it's just so simple, and it's just so true, and it's just so profound, and it's just so universally true. He writes, just so simple, everybody is in pain. Everybody is in pain. And one of the pains that I think people carry around is this complex pain of losing people before we lose them, followed by losing them for good. What do we do with that pain? And what is a response to that pain? So I think that Yizkor offers us a really beautiful and helpful response. Because it is true, it is universal, it is our common frail humanity that we lose the people that we love. And it is sometimes true, it is often true, that we lose them before we lose them. But Yizkor comes to remind us that we can flip the script. That after we lose them, we can have them again. This moment is about we lost them, and now we can have them again. This is a moment about recovering memories and stories and values in ways that are real and tangible and that lean forward into our future. Let me give you a few examples. It's actually as concrete as this podium. How recovery of memory is real and helpful and present. So Tuesday afternoon at 5 o'clock this past week, there was a fierce rainstorm. I don't mean to give you a weather report, but it was really raining hard. And it rained hard for about 2 hours on Tuesday, from kind of about 5 to kind of about 7. And I noticed this because a little after 7, I was driving to shul for the evening minyan. By the way, question, what's the best way to end a day? Answer at the evening minyan, 7:30. And I was driving home, I was driving from my house to the shul. It was after the rain, and I just noticed this golden glow of a sunset. I just observed it. I just noticed, like, wow, that is a golden glow of a sunset. And I just noted it, and I went in and announced page 120 for Ashrei and Mourner's Kaddish and another day. And I noticed in that service that there was a woman who was saying Kaddish, and I had never seen her before. And she wasn't a member of the shul. And when the service was over, I went up to her and introduced myself, and I asked her who she was and who she was saying Kaddish for. And she said, I'm saying Kaddish for my father. This is his 8th Yortzeit. And I said, tell me something about your father. And she said, my father loved sunsets. And my father had this superpower. He was alive to awe and to wonder. And he didn't have to go to a mountaintop or to a beach or to an ocean. He was alive to awe and wonder and nature in the typical part of a typical day living at home. And she offered, I was driving to shul to say Kaddish for my father, and I noticed the sunset. And my father and I used to share sunsets together. And he taught me awe. That awe is with me. My father is with me. My father is with me in the same way that that sunset is real. We lose our loved ones, and sometimes we lose our loved ones before we lose them, and we still have them after we lost them. I just can't say that enough. And we still have them after we lost them. And when we still have them after we lost them, sometimes it shapes how we live our lives literally every day. We don't always get a gorgeous sunset like that. But sometimes when we remember our loved ones, we've lost them, but we still have them. It shapes how we approach every single day of our life. So, one night at Minyan, this woman is telling a story about her father. She's observing the Yortzeit for her father, and she says, my dad was scrupulously, extremely ethical and honest. And here's the story that taught me that. When I was a little girl, my parents took me and my siblings out for dinner at a restaurant. And it was a nice meal, and we ate, and the bill came, and my parents paid. And then as we were leaving, I saw my father leave money on the table. And I was just a little girl. I didn't know why he did that. I thought he did it by mistake. So I grabbed the money, and I got into the car, and it was a half-an-hour drive, and we got home, and as the car pulled into the driveway, I said, Dad, guess what? You know that money you left by accident on the table? Here it is. And my father said, we're not getting out of the car, can't use the bathroom, don't get out of the car, we're going straight. It was a half an hour drive back to the restaurant. And he explained to me that that money was left on purpose to thank the waiter who worked hard and didn't make a lot of money, and to pay the waiter extra token of appreciation. And we walked up to the waiter in the restaurant, and my father taught me to apologize for making a mistake, and then I handed that money to the waiter. It took a half an hour to drive again and a half an hour to go home. And that hour I have been living every day of my life. It has shaped how I've tried to be an ethical person. It has shaped how I've tried to raise our kids. So we lose our loved ones. And sometimes we lose them before we lose them. But we still have them after we lose them. Now, we've known that. There's nothing that I've said yet that is new. You've been saying Yizkor since you lost your loved ones. You all know this. There's no chiddush here. But this year, I read something that gave me a whole new category for how to think of this phenomenon, that after we lose them, we still have them, and what we still have is real. It's a beautiful book which gave me, and I think gives us, a beautiful category. The book is Unfinished Love Story by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And as you know, Doris Kearns Goodwin is an acclaimed historian. She's managed to write these histories of US presidents that are both critical hits with scholars in the field and also popular hits. She's written presidential histories of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Lyndon Baines Johnson, and then combinations of all of the above. But this book, An Unfinished Love Story, is different. It's about her 42-year marriage to her husband, Dick Goodwin. So Dick Goodwin was a brilliant speechwriter and also policy shaper who worked in the White Houses of both President Kennedy and President Johnson during the 60s. And Dick Goodwin was a meticulous record keeper, and they had 300 boxes of meticulously kept records about his years in both the Johnson White House and the Kennedy White House before that. And they lived for all these years in Concord, Mass. And in the basement of their Concord house were these 300 boxes of photographs and memories and documents and letters and correspondence, et cetera, et cetera. And they were always too busy with their lives to go back into the past until near the end of Dick Goodwin's life. And near the end of his life, they decided, let's do this together. You've written so many histories. Help me write, Dick Goodwin said, help me write a history of my life working in the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. And they started this project one box at a time of 300 boxes, and every box is super, 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 super dense. And she's a historian, and he was there at the time, and they would read it, and they had, this is more nerdy baseball than you need, but she loved LBJ and was skeptical about JFK. He loved JFK and was skeptical about LBJ, and they would argue it out for every document, and then he was going to write the book in his voice. And then he dies mid-project. Now, imagine that you lose the love of your life to whom you've been married for 42 years. I can't even imagine how one gets up in the morning and does that. I can't even imagine if you've had 42 years of coming together at the end of the day and saying, how was your day, dear? How was your day, dear? What are we going to watch tonight? Why should we watch anything? You fall asleep. I can't even imagine that after doing that for 42 years, the love of your life is not there, and now your companion is your screen. Your companion is your iPad, and you're flicking from story to story that gives you angina. That's already Dayenu. But now imagine Doris Kearns Goodwin. Because she had not only that, nobody to say, how was your day, dear? But they were in the midst of a living conversation, and they were in the midst of writing this, of writing this story of his life in the 60s. And now all these boxes, and he's gone. And what is she going to do? And it would have been so easy to imagine somebody being paralyzed by grief, paralyzed by depression, paralyzed by the stillness of an empty home. But as she's going through these boxes, as she's recovering, she realizes she lost her husband, but she still has him. An unfinished love story is a double entendre. It speaks to the love story between Americans and America. How can our imperfect union reach its aspiration of highest ideals? And an unfinished love story is about Doris Kearns Goodwin and Dick Goodwin. And she found in these boxes inspiration on both counts. She found that Dick Goodwin had written all these things about how America has very frequently, she's writing this in the midst of our fraught political moment. And all the stuff you know, she knows. She really knows. And all the stuff we feel, she feels. She really feels. And she's got that same edge. And she looks in the boxes, and Dick Goodwin has all these texts and these texts that he's written where he says America has frequently been at odds with itself. And he names the different periods where there were plenty of prophets who said the American democratic experience is over. And he writes, it's not over, it's never over. America is stronger than it seems. And she felt, yes, we're going to be okay. And then when she was thinking, can I do this? Can I do this? She read about how in the 60s, Dick wrote that he believed that one person could really act with courage and change the world. And so she said, if that's how he felt, that's got to be how I feel. I can't write it in his name because he's gone, but I'm going to read his 300 boxes, and I'm going to write it in my name. And reading about Dick's courage inspired her to carry on and to keep on keeping on. Now, we're not Doris Kearns Goodwin, and few of us have 300 boxes of memorabilia and documents in our basement. But all of us have 300 boxes of memories and photographs and stories in our hearts and in our souls and in our minds. And this moment is about recovering them. So, for those of us who have lost our loved ones, and those who have lost whom we've lost before we lost them, now is our opportunity to recover them. To go back and be inspired by who they were, by what they taught us, and what they gave us that will be ours forever. We have them. We have them. And therefore we can face our future with strength again. Please rise.